within gaming. So it made sense that we should have this semester a themed talk series on cognitive science and gaming. And welcome to the last event in that. So we'll have a speaker and then a fast relay system. And then after that, there'll be time to socialize and meet people. And I just wanted to mention about meeting people. We have a nice group here of CogSci students and MDM students, and I think CogSci students also from UBC, faculty, academics, and a lot of industry folks. And some, a lot, are actually both academics and industry folks at some point. So there should be a lot of intermixing afterwards, and I thank you for coming, and we're going to get going. So I'm going to pass it over to the manager of the CogSci program, Shamina.
Thank you, Steve. Well, we're really pleased with the turnout, and as Steve says, the quality of the crowd is marvelous. You guys are going to have a good time. You'll meet a few more people in this research relay. It's 2 minutes each, so that'll follow the speaker. So we hope that you'll take advantage of those introductions and move around the room. Before we start, this is the final event of our Spring 2014 Defining Cognitive Science series. It's co-sponsored by SFU Cognitive Science program and also the Center for Digital Media's Masters in Digital Media program. Before I begin then, I want to offer our special thanks from the program to Ira Jones, Mark Lang, Kimberly Vole, and Richard Smith of CDM, and also Andy Moore, who was an adjunct, it seemed, at the last minute. Thank you to him for all that they've done to help. They've done a lot, really, to help make this evening possible. Also, I want to thank the students of this SFU Cognitive Science Student Society who are here today in force, volunteering enthusiastically with setup and registration. And I particularly want to draw your attention to one of our CogSci majors who's a talented graphic designer and acknowledge the super support of Sat Quintar. He designed our talk series poster and all of the graphic collateral that went with this series. Our new logo and other things. So, you know, I really want to appreciate, as an undergraduate, the work that he's done, including your name tags, by the way. I'd like to thank also the presenters of this series this term, both our main speakers and our 2-minute research relay participants who will follow Alexandre's talk. It's a great pleasure to bring academics and industry together tonight in this event. And for tonight, in addition to Mark and Kim here at CDM, we would like to thank Veronica Zamito for arranging a door prize from Electronic Arts. Special thanks also to Ryan Cousineau, who you will meet later, for bringing some of his games for us to play tonight. And with that, I'd like to hand this over to Kimberly Vole, Center for Digital Media, to introduce tonight's guest.
Thanks, Shamina. So some of you might recognize me from the first talk of this series, although I notice there are more of you here now. So I'm a professor here at the Center for Digital Media. This is my usual classroom space. You get to see me in the wild. And I am one of those weird folks who actually is an academic. My PhD is in artificial intelligence, computer science, and I have an undergraduate degree from the SFU Cognitive Science program a long time ago, so don't look it up, but the program is very, very near and dear to my heart, and I think it turns out some amazing and phenomenal students, some of whom who have come back to be Center for Digital Media students, and I also have taught the UBC Cognitive Science program as well. So the entire ecosystem, I think, is just full of phenomenal, exciting, amazing people. And I'm really glad to see you guys here. I think you're going to see a lot of stuff that's going to be really, really exciting. Anyhow, this isn't about me. This is all about our good friend Alex, my good friend Alex. So I'm going to introduce him by reading out the bio, because otherwise I'll mess it up, and he's phenomenal, and I don't want to miss anything. But Alexandre Mandryka is a game designer, creative director, and design director with experience on a wide variety of game genres on PC and consoles, centered in the core gaming market. After starting his career in France, he worked at Ubisoft Montreal for 6 years, where he helped develop many of the studio's recent key products, Far Cry, Assassin's Creed, Rainbow Six, Splinter Cell, as well as the in-house design discipline. He then moved to Vancouver to hold the design director position at Relic Entertainment, and is now developing his game design consulting practice, lucky for us, at GameWhispering.com. His interests lie in making sense of the craft of design, from the abstract concepts of creativity management to the nuts and bolts of low-level mechanics. So it is very much my pleasure to welcome our special guest and my friend, Alexandre Mandryka.
I have this one. Thank you. Are we okay? Yep. All right. Thank you, Kim. So, yeah, I want to thank you for reading out loud this introduction, but also to having me here. I'm actually pretty happy to be here because CDM seems like it's kicking ass because most of the students, all of the students of Kim I've talked to, very bright people, and I think we need like a more in-depth approach and a more academic approach to game design to further the medium that's actually pretty young. So that said, I'm going to talk to you today about defining gameplay because I don't know what it means at all. So, yeah, so, I was director of design at various companies, so I have a bit of professional experience. And my background actually was in biology and neurosciences because I wanted to study the human brain, and for some reasons I ended up making video games. And I've done a lot of living room research, so that's just like browsing the internet, trying to find books, understanding what it is. And I'm here very humbly to try to submit my research to you guys to poke holes at it, because if you can tell me I'm wrong, that's the first step to maybe someday being right. So it's more about what I can get from this than what you guys can get out of it. Anyways. So what is the problem I'm trying to discuss? The problem is, in this industry, people keep telling you, is your gameplay fun? Like, you need to find the fun. That's what you hear in these boardrooms. That's what $30 million plus projects are based on. Have you found the fun? And the thing is, it doesn't mean anything. Like, what's fun is very subjective. What the fun is actually a word that a user can use. Yeah, I find it fun. But the main problem is it doesn't really inform someone that's trying to create said fun. It's exactly like if you would ask a concept artist, make something beautiful. He would tell you, yeah, of course, I have skills. Beautiful is a measure of how skilled I am, but it doesn't inform me at all. I don't understand what you mean. So it actually has a very negative impact on the industry, and that's pretty much how you feel as a game designer. You don't really know what game design is. You don't really know what gameplay is, what fun is. Everybody has an opinion, and when you evaluate your job based on opinions, it's really bad for the creative aspect of it. It actually had very negative impact on my health. So I had to fight back, right? And the starting point is really to first try to discuss pleasure and fun, because these are words we toss around like addiction, and we don't really know what they mean. So, pleasure is something that is actually very, it's just biochemistry, like. And it's actually, I think it's linked to evolution. So if you have a very simple life forms like bacteria, they evolve through mutations, and they are random, and they acquire traits. And some traits, compared to the environment, make you survive or make you die, because you cannot process glucose and there's only fructose in the environment. So, you end up dying because you don't have the function or the trait to survive in the environment. More evolved living forms actually have a process system that we call behaviors. And different behaviors, well, some behaviors can lead you to die based on the environment, but hopefully you have time to adapt and to have your behavior encouraged or discouraged, and you can adapt and still survive. It's not such of a binary approach. And it's really, I think, functional because of the way, bacteria, like evolution mutations, are a random occurrence. And it happens every time your cell multiplies. And it works with bacteria and very simple organisms because of the speed and the speed of the generations. But the problem is with more evolved living beings, it takes like up to 15 or 10 or multiple years to actually get to maturations, and so you cannot rely on random mutations to adapt. So the fact that you have behaviors that can be encouraged or discouraged is a shorter cycle into adaptation. And it's really all about chemistry. So you have, like, for example, dopamine, that's one of the neurotransmitters. And so you have a bunch of stuff that happens before triggering events, and stuff happens afterwards. And we actually don't care at all about this. What we care about is the fact that it gives us pleasure, and what we really care about, what triggers that chain of events. And there's one person that's called Jackman. He wrote that book. So he's a biochemist, and he back in the last century, biology was still pretty under pressure science because it talks about the living. And so there was this theory of nature has an intention, nature has an intent. And he actually merged together the fact that Mendel said that DNA is invariant, like it reproduces itself, and also the fact that Darwin said, well, there's still variation, And so he actually bridged the two together, and he introduced the concept of, he called it telenomy, and that's the fact that he says nature has no intention. But still, it looks like nature, like evolution and selection, makes us more fit, right? So it's kind of a logical bridge that says function is actually a result of necessity. There's no preconceived intention to our selection and our mutation. And for example, language appeared because of random mutations, and it was selected by necessity, but not the other way around. So based on that telenomy concept, you can actually say, okay, so I have a bunch of neurotransmitters that are given to my brain or my body based on certain activities. And you can pretty much say, okay, all of these guys give us pleasure, and because of the concept of telenomy, you can say that everything that gives us pleasure has been selected by evolutive pressure, and we do it because we're encouraged by pleasure, and we survived. Those that had pleasure for things that weren't positive for them disappeared. So you can pretty much say that everything that gives us pleasure is good for us, is positive for us. And yeah, so instead of just doing clinical studies of what does this action produce in terms of dopamine, you can pretty much say everything that gives us pleasure because we adapted and selected is positive for us. So in the same way around, like everything that's positive for us is going to give us pleasure. So you can look at all these activities like understanding things or exercising or giving birth or socializing. All of these things you can understand that they are positive for us. So that's, pleasure, but it's not yet talking about fun. So there's this study by Alan Dix, that's a computer scientist, and he wrote this paper that he called Fun Systematically. And so he looked at firecrackers, and he tried to actually reproduce that concept into digital firecrackers. And so he went to that process of removing elements to see what was remaining as the fun factor. And so he drew that Venn diagram where you have the engaging things and the fun things, and those that are both. And obviously those are neither. And obviously you can find many things that are engaging but not fun, like driving or passing exams. You can find tons of stuff that are engaging but also fun, like playing games. But what is actually fun but not engaging? What is that element? And so he said, what if I take like waiting for water to boil? I wait for water to boil. What can I add to get into that fun zone? And his theory is that if I have an unexpected result, if I'm waiting for something to happen, I don't know what it's going to be, that can make that experience of just waiting for water to boil fun. So that missing piece is unexpected, the unexpectancy. And when you learn, so you learn how to ride a bike where you stab wheels, and at one point you're kind of bored. And boredom is really a signal. Well, nature has no intention, but that's pretty much nature telling you you're not learning anything. You need to move on and learn something else because otherwise you're going to be selected. And then you remove your stab wheels and you start learning again. So you actually are improving your skills. And then once you master riding a bike, how can I have fun? Well, you can have fun with making more tricky to balance yourself, or going super fast, or trying to drift. That's how we all went through, like, learning how to ride a bike and how can I make it fun, I'm cruising, but I want some more fun. And all of these guys are actually linked to uncertainty. And of course, it points to the theory of flow and Csikszentmihalyi, where, the flow channel, your ability matches the difficulty of your task, and that's what he calls the flow channel, and you're engaged. But really, it's about pushing the boundaries. Pushing the boundaries is where you're going to have fun. And when you look at skiing versus snowboarding, most people say when they start snowboarding, even if you're not very skilled, it has more fun potential. I think that's because you're always trying to balance yourself as you're doing snowboarding, just like when you're riding a bike or a motorbike. It's actually inherently more fun because you are always balancing yourself. So you're always in that zone of uncertainty. So it's really about challenge, uncertainty, and discovery. And going back to flow, so that's the definition of flow. And I think it looks similar, fun looks similar, but it's actually kind of a fringe effect, because the zone of fun is really when you are at the limit of your skill level. Because flow is really adapted when you want people to be engaged in work. You want them to be in the zone, so they don't think about, they're not frustrated, they're not bored, they're just in the zone. And you want them in flow, so they're the most efficient at doing their task. But fun, I think, is really at the same channel, but at the fringe, when you're exploring your limit and pushing these limits. And I'm not saying that you cannot have pleasure on the lower side, but fun and pleasure are different. Pleasure is just dopamine being released. Fun, I think, is actually exploring your limits. And if you go, to the data from psychology, it actually says that reward patterns based on variable and uncertain schedules are more rewarding, more engaging. So there's definitely an element of uncertainty in this. So my definition of fun is, it's the desired exploration of uncertainty. And by this, I mean learning. Learning is exploring uncertainty and trying to figure out what's going on. Tic-tac-toe, now you would say it's not fun, but it was fun up until you actually solved it. At first, you're not really sure which move is the right one, and that's fun. And at one point you realize, oh, I solved it, there's no uncertainty anymore, and that's when it ceases to be fun. I think eating cake could be fun if there's different layers, and there's this element of discovery where you break through the layers. One is soft, one is what is like caramel, one is sugary. So going through experiencing uncertainty is fun, just like reading a book. If I read a book and I can anticipate the end, I won't end that sentence because you're bored already, right? So that's my definition of fun, and that's how it differs from pleasure. What's fun gives you pleasure, but not everything that gives you pleasure is fun. Eating sugar gives you pleasure because of dopamine, but it's not fun. So we got this out of the way. So now, gameplay. What's gameplay? And the problem with this is when you try to look around, actually it was coined maybe 35 years ago by a journalist, and the definition kind of always was in flow. And you know you're in trouble when you look it up in Wikipedia, and that's how it starts like. It's like, yeah, we don't really know. And then there's like 3 pages, and it actually contradicts itself all the time, and so you know you're in trouble. And so that's what Google tells you. It's like, it's the plot of a computer or video game or the way it's played. Which one is it? I don't know. Chess has no plot. There's still gameplay, right? So not good. There's also misquotes. So that's actually a misquote. The guy that said that it's not gameplay. Game is a series of interesting choices. There's some of them that are actually better, and there's elements of it, the structure of player interaction with the game system and with other players in the game. So, you know, there's elements here that seem more promising. But the main issue with all of these is still, these couldn't really help me do my job as a game designer. There's so many different definitions, it doesn't really help me. And then I realized, yeah, so, you know, as you might have heard, I'm actually French. And the thing is, in all the Latin languages, fun and play and game are actually the same root. It's the same word. So in all of these languages, je jouais. In French, there's no gameplay. It's je jouais. And so you're like, of course, that's why I don't get it at all. Doesn't make any sense. So, you know, so you go back to etymology, and even though game and play actually share a good amount of meaning together, they actually differ on the fringe. And game, when you look at it, is actually an activity driven by rules, and it also defines the actual elements of the game itself, the physical shape, the game board, the rules. Play, on the other hand, is like frisk, movement, freedom, you know, exploration, free movement. So on one end, you have structure with the actual physical shape, the boundaries of the field, and the referee that whistles when you don't abide by the rules of the game. And on the other end, you have freedom, you know, play. So they sound really like contradicting one another, right? So there might be something there. And actually, you have that. So on one hand, you have structure. On the other hand, you have freedom. And you have these idioms where a door plays on its hinges. And when you look at cogs, the way they operate, you have to have what they call clearance for them to actually operate. So this is structured freedom, right? There's some leeway, but it is structured. And the thing is, when you look at reality is the worst game ever, right? You have tons of choices, and you have tons of possibilities. And like, let's say I want to buy a house. Oh, I need a mortgage. Should I go open or close mortgage? Well, the thing is, you can actually have both. You can have a part of it that's variable, that's fixed, and the other one that's also variable, but it's variable. And so you have so many choices that none of them are clear. And also the problem is, you don't have any feedback on whether you've made a good choice or not. You might never know if it was the good mortgage you took. So reality actually sucks quite a lot. Because we're not sure how to, it's not structured enough. It's too vague. So we don't understand it. That's not how we cannot understand reality as a whole. So we actually need symbols. You know, mathematics, biology, all science, even programming, even music, it's an abstraction. We actually say, what if there's no friction, and then I can calculate movement, you know, I can calculate speed. So the process of abstraction is to say, I simplify the problem to better understand it. So, you know, because the universe is too complex, so that's why we use mental models. And these mental models are symbols. And all of these symbols make it so that we know if we're right or wrong. There's no leeway. You know, it's abstracted. So it's structured in a way that makes us able to understand them. If there's too much structure, for example, when you program, when you code something, so you build a program, and a program is structured, but it still allows for some leeway in what type of data it's going to treat, like Photoshop. It's structured, but you can treat many different types of files and everything. If it's too structured, you don't even call it a program, you call it an automaton, right? So too much structure makes it useless. It's there, but the use is very limited. If there's too much freedom on the other end, well, it's just like, it's meaningless. There's people moving around, it's like the primordial soup, Brownian movement. It's free, but there's no meaning. So when you look at the most structured form of matter, it's actually a crystal. So all the atoms are neatly organized, it looks really nice, but it's dead. On the other end, freedom is just like the Big Bang, a Big Bang is actually structured, but there's no meaning, in between, the living cell is actually structured freedom because there's membranes and submembranes, but within them, all the molecules can move around. And so even walking is dynamic unbalanced. I'm always unbalanced, and yet I'm structured. And so this is abstraction, this is structured, but still you can express yourself. Like, it still lets you treat many different things. This is a language, the first recorded expression. So using symbols, like language is a symbol, and I don't really believe in any religion, but it's really interesting when you say, at the beginning was the Word, even before talking about God, right? The Word, and God comes after the Word. What I think it means is, without language, we don't exist, in the sense that we don't, to exist is to be out of it, and so you can look back at it. Without words, we don't think. So without words, we're just mindless beasts. We don't exist. We don't have any conscience. So that's a symbol. And we use different sorts of symbol. We use math, we use, pretty much everything we do has to go through symbolic state, or we don't understand it, right? But why we do this? Of course, we use symbols to better master the word. So an abstraction, playing, is an abstraction of a real-life situation. So we can eliminate what's noisy and what's complex about it, so we can better master it. So Ralph Koster actually wrote a book, The Theory of Fun, and that's what he says, like, playing is learning, and he's a big proponent of symbols himself. And he says that understanding a game is grokking the concept, the mechanic of the game, so you can treat it like a symbol. It becomes a symbol. So games are symbols too. So if you look at the characteristics of symbol, so they're structured. When you write letters to express yourself, or words, they're structured. Yet the system you use allows for variations, or it's going to be dead. It's not, you cannot express yourself if you don't allow variations. Language, all of these systemic, symbolic systems, they actually evolve. There's plasticity. When you talk, languages always evolve. We actually, as we use them to better understand the concepts, language itself evolves. And they also live in abstraction. And by abstraction, I mean there's clear-cut rules that tell you whether you're right or you're wrong when you use them. And so going back to games, so that sentence was coined by Sid Meier, and probably like the most famous sentence about game. Game is a series of interesting choices. And the thing is, it's actually vague what interesting choices are. Actually, he came back a few years later and expressed that you have to provide signs for the player to understand the choices he's about to make. So, he actually made all the civilization games and everything. And every of these choices, like should I build an academy or a military fort, they actually give you, or you don't really see that well here, but they give you all the stats, all the impact of your choices before you make them, so you can understand them. So it becomes like a, symbolic. It's actually an abstract. It actually informs the decision of how do you expand your resources. And he also says that good decisions are situational. And what I think it means is that introduces the element of uncertainty. What it means is a good decision shouldn't be good in all situations, or it's too structured. So that's where you introduce uncertainty. So that's where you actually understand that the system must be deep but consistent, so you can make predictions without having certainty, or it's like tic-tac-toe and it's not interesting anymore. So actually digging deeper, what I see with this sentence is you have the clear choices, you have to be able to anticipate the impact of your choices, you have to have an outcome that's difficult to predict, and you have to have clear feedback on the impact of your decisions. And so really, so that comes with science, causality, complex interactions and feedback, and all of these elements are structure and uncertainty. So actually the talk was dubbed structure and chaos, just for the hype effect, but what I really mean is structure and uncertainty. And when I look at this, I actually go back to flow, because the requirements of the situation for flow to happen are you have to have clarity in your goals. You have to have immediate and clear feedback on whether you're right or wrong. And you have to be to understand that you're capable of doing the task, which is the opposite of reality, because you don't know, it's not clear, you don't have feedback, and that's why reality is a very bad game. So when Sid Meier says a game is a series of interesting choices, what I think it is clear choices, the right one being uncertain. So what's pretty exciting about this is, I'm running late now. So what's pretty exciting about this is it actually then informs how you create gameplay, and you can say, what are the elements of structure and what are the elements that introduce uncertainty? So running quick now. So I think math is actually gameplay. So the way they teach you math, they give you the theorem, and they say, if you have two triangles with parallel sides, then the ratio of the sides is equal. That's what the theorem says. Then the first step is they say, okay, so you have exactly the same pattern. We give you the length of the sides. Just apply the damn theorem. That's the first step. And then what they do is they give you that more complex thing where they say, calculate this one, but you're like, I can't because I'm missing information. And really what you need to do is calculate this one first using the theorem, and then you can apply it to the situation at hand. So that's gameplay. And to me, so I call this a winning play. Like it's the situation you know how to solve, and all of gameplay on that branch of gameplay is going to be variations and steps, so you get back to this situation you know how to solve. If you apply that to video games, an example is, imagine a game about flanking, like Gears of War or Company of Heroes. So the winning play is, oh, I'm here, so I need to flank these guys because I have continuous cover. They won't be able to hurt me. It's fine. I just need to go there, and that solves the situation. This is the theorem. That's easy challenge. I just need to understand flanking. Now, imagine this situation where I have gaps in the cover. I know where I need to go to flank them. The problem is, how do I pass that gap? I'm going to get shot, right? So now you can say, oh, imagine that maybe you can throw a grenade to give you cover, or maybe I suppress them so they can't fire me, and I can go back to the situation where I can apply the winning play and just win. And maybe you have other situations where it's like, oh, I know where I need to go, but the problem is there's a wall in between, so maybe I I can blow it up with the explosives or whatever. So the same concept of I have that winning play that I established, and then I just create layers with steps within that axis of gameplay. So you know, I go back to music to understand the symbolic systems, and music, you have to abide by high-level principles that are like rhythm and harmony. And I know you have different types of harmony, but when you create music, you have to select one type of norm and to abide by that norm. And then within one given song, you actually create a sub-norm where you select a key, and you actually decide your beat and your melody and your bass line. And so you actually structure, you select one norm, and you compose that song within, you actually specify another type of norm. And we know, you know, pop songs operate within like set types of structure. What is really interesting is, I was talking about jazz, you know, free jazz. Free jazz is the musicians actually play the theme, so that's sub-norm. Each instrument plays that theme, then they play it all together at once, so you know that's the melody of that song, and then they kind of go crazy. And then when they go back to the theme, that's when everybody claps, because you realize that craziness was actually in tune with, that was just variation on that theme. So that's the eureka moment when you realize, yeah, that was just a variation on that theme. And that's when everybody claps and is just happy because of the dopamine rush. So they show you that craziness that actually happens to be in tune, and that's what you learn or experience. And what's really interesting is, of course, harmony is actually verified by physics. You know, it's like you can calculate what note is in tune with other note because it's a function of the sound wave. And the jazz, you know, the more, you can actually bend the notes. You can actually play a note that's actually not really in harmony based on the physics, but they still play it. They explore that zone of uncertainty. What's really funny is when they play these notes, they go like this. And when you listen to someone, you also feel it on your body. And they call that harmonic tension. And at the end, you have harmonic resolution when they go back to what's on key. And that's where you can actually feel it on your body, in your body, right? In games, it's actually the same. I don't know if you know that game. It's a very old game. So the first level is they just make you move and jump and shoot. These are the three instruments, and they play the score independently. They never force you to mix them. Second level, they force you to jump and move and shoot in unison. What is really interesting is to kill that guy, you need to shoot at that height, pretty much like the apex of the jump. And then the third level, you fight that boss. And the boss is the exotic guy, you know, it's kind of the solo. So he's fully armored, and you can only shoot him in the state of his armor. But the state of his armor is not at the apex of the jump, it's slightly lower. So this is winning play. This is harmonic tension. This is me bending the note. I don't know, I find it pretty interesting. Yeah, this is what I spent my nights on. So my demonstration was to say, okay, music and gameplay is kind of the same, but so there must be high-level concept, high-level rules to gameplay. So actually, when you look at it, you can find them. And they go like this, like each player should have equivalent chances. There should be strong causality in your game system and consistent behavior. There should be balance in between the different available strategies. Risk should be a function of reward. Like the more risk you take, the better the reward should be. The most skilled player should win or at least have an advantage. In terms of structure, The good form is showing an objective, having the challenge, and then having the reward. And the last element is you need clarity. You know, going back to flow, you need clarity, you need signs and feedback on whether you succeed or you fail. And these are the equivalent of the rules of harmony, within which you can create your own winning play, which is like the sub-norm of your game. So as I said, you can look at gameplay from the angle of what are the elements that create structure, what are the elements that create variation. So the sources of structure in a game could be like the fact that your system is predictable, so you can create a mental model of it. So, and also the fact that you have actually deliberate choices. You know, not like, oh, I'm going to take a mortgage, but part of it is variable, part of it is fixed. This is a non-deliberate choice. So going back to that mental model, you have your game elements. Pretty much what you see on the board. These are all game elements. They interact with the game systems, and that creates dynamics. Another player has to be able to understand all of these to create a mental model on how these dynamics work, so he can establish a strategy to interact with the dynamics. And he actually becomes part of the dynamic at that point. But there you understand that that's why the system needs to be consistent, needs to behave in a predictable way, so you can actually build that model and interact with the game. So the need for consistency, you know, the behaviors must be predictable, and even in the case of the bonuses you get in Mario Kart, even there's the variation should be systemic if you want to use that to create consistency and structure in your gameplay. Also, I'm not going to spend much time on that, but the fact that you have consistency in the type of challenge in a game makes it more structure for the player to interact with. So the need for clarity. If you look at this equation, it looks pretty benign. You know, it's like, oh, it's pretty good. I can solve it. I can pickle it, man. But if you solve it, it actually looks like this, which is actually this. And this is ugly. You never get that when you're studying math. That's not how they teach you math. They teach you math by having integer. You know, the x is always like, that's how I actually passed my courses. I was just dozing, and the teacher would say, what is x equal to? And I'm like, maybe 1? Ah, you're right. You know. Because the challenge is not calculation, the challenge is dealing with symbols. So that's how you're consistent with the type of challenge. Just like you're consistent with the type of key when you play a song. So we want nice looking solutions. So to build such a solution, you have to think backwards and say, this is the solution I want, and then you actually select the parameters of your equation. These elements, you select them knowing what you want solution to be like in the end, knowing how you want it to emerge as. And so clarity is why, you know, the bosses, it's like, oh, hit the red thing. It's clear, crystal clear who you want to hit. And you have to go back to flow. It's the same thing. Clear requirements, clear goals, immediate feedback. Am I doing right or wrong? And that author is pissed off because they want it to fit. That thing is dealing with abstraction there, and he's pissed off because it doesn't fit. So, you know. So a bit more on clarity, you know, there has to be clear-cut success failure. Like when you speak, either it's right with grammar or wrong. There's no like, oh, maybe it's. That's how symbolic structure work. Otherwise, we couldn't really communicate, right? So there's no flesh wounds in Counter-Strike. You hit or not or miss. There's no like, you're right. Okay. Also, of course, if I need to shoot here, there needs to be enough time for me to recognize the pattern and shoot. And clarity of feedback gives me, you know, better reward. I need to rush to this. Deliberate choices. So the point is, in StarCraft, if I want, it's actually about, should I spend in army, technology, or economy? If I want to develop economy, it's not incremental spend. I need to go build another base. And during that time, I'm weak to the other type of choice. So that's going back to the non-complex mortgage example. You need to have deliberate choices. And I'm really running late. Requirements, strong, okay. So mental model, I can only do these moves when I have super charge. I'm gonna tell you that the quality of Halo is because you have these 3 clear choices between shooting, melee, or grenade. Uncertainty, the fact that you can play real time, the reaction time, the fact that maybe your game is based on physics, the fact that you have analog controls. All of these execution-based uncertainty sources are great, except it's going to be limited by the depth of your simulation system. You can spend your life dealing with archery and try to master that because the simulation of reality is deep enough that is interesting. Even in Quake, it's not deep enough to be the sole element of uncertainty because it's capped. So now going to a decision, the clear decision, the right one should be uncertain. So elements of randomness. Obviously, having randomness is the easiest way to introduce uncertainty, but you can build your random system so it's still structured. And actually, when you look at poker, I bet based on I value my odds of success. So what I'm doing is I'm structuring uncertainty. I'm structuring chaos. Structuring chaos is playing a game. I'm going to skip on that example because I can't talk about it. Having partial or complete information obviously can be a source of uncertainty. If I don't know what my opponent has in his hand, I don't know what he has on his deck. Having all of that actually can create uncertainty. And StarCraft is really rock, paper, scissors, but there wouldn't be any depth if I couldn't have elements to actually scout and know, is he building scissors, is he building rock, or is he building paper? So that's why you see uncertainty, and you give tools to the player to structure that uncertainty. Quickly now, I'm already late. Discernment, quantity of options. Obviously, having tons of options is a source of uncertainty, like in chess. But I think you have more refined games when they actually... So you can place all the turrets anywhere here. Having spots where you can only create turrets at specific locations create these more clear choices, which are better. And we know we have the paradox of choice. When you have too much choice, you're overwhelmed, and obviously these guys are going to tell you that's not good. Lastly, before I conclude, simple systems but complex interactions. Actually, we can predict the tide. We can predict the solstice. So all of these elements are easy to predict. Now, when they work in conjunction, they can create pretty dramatic effects. So all of these systems are easy to understand on their own. What's interesting is because they interact with one another, that's where it creates something that's difficult to understand, and that's good. Definition of gameplay is a symbolic representation of a problem that structures a space of possibility to allow for the research and evaluation of solutions. And now the last part that I'm going to rush through. So we know Plato says good, beauty, and truth are kind of the same thing. What's really interesting is the theory, what we like, is actually true. Like the Fibonacci sequences are actually have value in real life. It's actually the optimal distribution of leaves for a tree to capture the most sun. It's also like optimal distribution of matter. It's the same thing with music. Like what's in harmony, what gives us pleasure is also true because it's actually verified by physics. So I think fun gives us pleasure because it teaches us something that's true. And so what games teach us. And really, when you look at game, there's actually a few things that they teach you. They teach you about a choice between short or long term, or low or high risk. And that teaching is actually valuable in real life. Should I plant all of my seeds and maybe starve through the winter? Or should I eat, but maybe the next harvest is going to be low? So just like physics is a symbolic structure that lets us understand the physical world around us, good gameplay should give us symbolic problems that let us better understand them. But the real point of gameplay, I thought gameplay was about systems. But really, when you realize humans are for cyborgs, and by cyborgs, I mean you have to interface, you have to use tools to survive. But you use tools in the way that they change you. You become one with the tool, and that's when you become a cyborg. And as I said, like, it gives us pleasure to learn a new tool. It gives us pleasure to ride a bike. So it must be beneficial for us, right, if we go back to telonomy. And so that's where I think games are actually about interfacing, not about systems, but about interfacing. So a mental model is interfacing with systems. Execution, or playing basketball, is interfacing with the physical world around us. And that's what games as symbolic structure allow us to explore and to interface either with concepts or with the physical world. Interfacing is actually instinctual. It's not only us. Like, when you look at these animals, they seem to enjoy it because he could just let go of these roller skates and go on his own, yet he's doing it, right? So why is it instinctual? Actually, it's instinctual because the first thing we need to interface with is our own body. It's valuable to interface. I think life is about interfacing with you guys, interfacing with concepts, interfacing with our own body. And so good games, you know, the aesthetics of games should be like games that provide you good system to interact with. True form, Tetris is not about scoring points. Tetris is about choosing between long term or short term. Quake is not about shooting. Quake is about controlling space, controlling these items. And that's my last slide. The thing is, we don't really enjoy when we're learning to interface with a keyboard. What we enjoy is when I don't even think about it, I'm one with the keyboard, and that's when the real fun begins. The flow also begins. I don't enjoy when I'm struggling to learn how to ride that bike. I'm enjoying when I don't even think about the small elements. These small elements don't even matter because I'm always interfacing with the whole concept. It's the same with anecdotes. Hey, you know, this morning I went out and I found a dollar bill, and that's a cool story, bro. It's actually an anecdote. It's not even a story. It's just elements that I tell you. We don't really like this. What we really like is drama or tragedy or something that is built to denote a higher concept. And I think that slide is empty, but no, it's not. So it's the same with games. When you look at Pac-Man, they actually have only 3 AI states. They either chase you, or they scatter, or they run away. You could say, so what it means, the higher concept for a player is, here I'm being hunted. Here I have short relief, and here I'm the hunter. You could have a more complex system that says, how about if the ghost could be in different AI states at once? One could be hunting. What would be better, you know, I feel better as a designer, but really it would be more vague. Like, I couldn't understand these concepts because it would be like real life. It would. So because you limit the variation of these AI pattern, it actually creates that true form of really I'm dealing with how aggressive or safe should I be playing that game. And I think it goes back to these guys where the telonomy, like the emergent purpose of games is to give you a more crystallized symbolic form. The clarity of this actually creates more engagement, better engagement, And the uncertainty of the right choice is what creates fun. And I think I was only 8 minutes late, so that's it. So you can contact me, or you can talk to me afterwards. I would be happy. And now it's open for questions and comments.